Imagine waking up one day to find strangers building houses on your land you've cherished for years, a quiet lakeside spot in Texas where you plan to build memories, not a neighborhood. That's exactly what happened to me. It's a story that sounds too wild to be true, but it's real, and it's a nightmare I'm still unraveling. Stick with me as I walk you through how I discovered an HOA had illegally built a neighborhood on my property, completely unaware it's a flood control reservoir. This is just the start, and trust me, you'll want to hear what comes next. I've owned this lakeside property for years. It's a beautiful slice of Texas, with water sparkling under the sun and wide open space that feels like freedom. I inherited it from my grandfather, who loved the land for its peace and quiet. He always said it was a place to escape the noise of the world. I never planned to develop it, just keep it as a retreat, maybe build a small cabin someday. It was my piece of paradise, or so I thought. I'd visit every few months, walk the shore, and let the calm sink in. Nothing prepared me for what I found on my last trip. It was a sunny Saturday when I pulled up to the property. As I drove down the dirt road, I noticed something odd: construction equipment. Bulldozers, cranes, and piles of lumber were scattered across my land. My heart sank. Where my quiet lakeside should have been, there were half-built houses, maybe a dozen, with workers hammering away. A shiny sign at the entrance read, "Lakeside Estates, brought to you by INAME." My stomach twisted. This was my property. How could an HOA be building here? I hadn't sold it, leased it, or given anyone permission to touch it. I parked, got out, and just stood there, staring at this invasion of my land. I approached one of the workers, my voice shaking. "Who authorized this?" I asked. He shrugged, pointed to a trailer labeled HOA office, and went back to work. Inside the trailer, I met a site manager who seemed as confused as I was. He pulled out a stack of papers and said the HOA had permits to build a new community here. "Permits?" I said. "This is my land. I own it." His face went pale as he fumbled through documents, unable to show me anything proving they had the right to build. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just a mix-up, it was a massive overstep. I drove home that day, my mind racing. How could an HOA build an entire neighborhood on my property without a single phone call or letter? I dug through my records, pulling out the deed to confirm what I already knew. The land was mine, clear as day. But as I looked closer at the property details, something else caught my eye. My land wasn't just a lakeside paradise. It was part of a flood control reservoir, one of those areas designed to hold water during heavy rains to protect nearby cities from flooding. Think places like Addicks or Barker near Houston, built to save lives but not meant for homes. My grandfather never mentioned this, and I hadn't thought much about it until now. The HOA clearly didn't know either, or they wouldn't have dared to build. I started making calls. First, to a lawyer friend who deals with property disputes. She was floored. "They can't just build on your land," she said. "That's trespassing at minimum." She told me to gather every document I had, deeds, tax records, anything proving ownership. Next, I called the county to check if any permits had been filed. Sure enough, the HOA had applied for construction permits, but they listed the land as theirs. Somehow, they'd either forged documents or completely missed that I owned it. My lawyer said this could be a case of fraud or gross negligence. Either way, it was illegal, and those houses shouldn't be there. As I stood on my property again the next week, watching workers pour concrete for a street, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just about my land anymore. It was about the people who might buy these homes, thinking they're safe, unaware they're in a flood zone. The HOA's mistake wasn't just a violation of my rights, it was a disaster waiting to happen. I knew I had to act, but where do you even start when someone's building a neighborhood on your property? So, there I was, standing on my own Texas lakeside property, staring at a neighborhood that shouldn't exist. An HOA had built houses on my land without permission, and I just learned it's part of a flood control reservoir. The question burning in my mind was, how could this happen? How does an entire organization miss something this big? Buckle up, because the reasons behind this mess are wild, and they'll make you rethink what you know about HOAs, land development, and Texas itself. Let's dive into why this disaster unfolded. First, let's talk about flood control reservoirs. These aren't just random lakes or ponds, they're engineered systems designed to save cities from flooding. Picture massive areas, like Addicks or Barker reservoirs near Houston, built to hold water when storms hit. When heavy rains come, these reservoirs catch the overflow, protecting homes and businesses downstream. My property, as I discovered, sits in one of these zones. It's not meant for houses because when the water rises, everything there could be underwater. That's what makes this HOA's mistake so dangerous. They built where no one should. So, how did they mess up this badly? It starts with how HOAs and developers operate. Many are driven by profit, racing to build new neighborhoods as fast as they can. Land in Texas is hot. Everyone wants a piece of it, especially near water. But in their rush, some cut corners. They might skip proper land surveys or ignore public records that show who owns what. In my case, the HOA either didn't check the deed or assumed they could claim the land because it looked undeveloped. My lawyer thinks they might have seen my quiet lakeside as an easy target, thinking no one would notice. That's a bold move and a reckless one. Then there's Texas itself. If you know anything about this state, you know it's a place where development moves fast. Texas has some of the loosest zoning laws in the country, which makes it a haven for builders. Cities are expanding, suburbs are popping up, and HOAs are everywhere, managing new communities. But loose rules can lead to big mistakes. Unlike states with strict regulations, Texas often lets developers move forward with minimal oversight. That's how homes end up in risky places, like floodplains or, in my case, a reservoir meant to hold floodwater. It's not just my land. Stories like this are more common than you'd think. I did some digging and found cases that sound eerily similar. Take Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Hundreds of homes in Houston flooded because they were built in or near reservoirs. People lost everything, not knowing their dream homes were in danger zones. Blogs and news reports point to developers ignoring flood maps or downplaying risks to make a sale. One article I read quoted a Texas official saying, "Developers know the risks, but they build anyway, and HOAs don't always check." That hit hard. My HOA didn't just steal my land, they put future homeowners at risk, all for a quick buck. Another piece of the puzzle is how flood zones are communicated. The federal government, through FEMA, maps out flood risks, but those maps aren't always easy to find or understand. I had to hunt through county records to confirm my property's status, and even then, it wasn't clear until my lawyer explained it. HOAs are supposed to check these maps before building, but some don't bother. Or worse, they rely on outdated surveys that miss critical details, like a reservoir designation. One video I watched interviewed a homeowner who bought in a flood zone because the developer forgot to mention it. Sound familiar? That's what's happening on my land. As I stood there, looking at those half-built houses, I couldn't help but wonder how many people were involved in this mistake. Did the HOA board know? Did the developers just not care? Or was it a chain of errors? Bad surveys, lazy paperwork, and greed? Whatever the reason, they built on my property, in a place that could flood at any moment. The more I learned, the angrier I got. This wasn't just a mix-up, it was a failure that could ruin lives. And I wasn't about to let it slide. I'm still reeling from the shock of finding an entire neighborhood being built on my Texas lakeside property, land I own, land that's part of a flood control reservoir. The HOA had no right to build here, and now I'm left grappling with the fallout. This isn't just about my land being stolen, it's about the ripple effects that could destroy lives, wallets, and dreams. Stick with me as we unpack the consequences of this massive mistake, because what's at stake is bigger than you might think. It's a mess that keeps you hooked, wondering how deep this disaster goes. The first thing that hits you is the flood risk. My property isn't just a pretty lakeside. It's part of a flood control reservoir, designed to hold water when storms hit to protect cities like Houston from flooding. Think about what happened during Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Homes built in reservoirs like Addicks or Barker were swallowed by water when the reservoirs did their job. Families lost furniture, memories, even their sense of safety. Now, picture those shiny new houses on my land, built by the HOA, filled with families who have no clue their homes could be underwater the next time a big rain comes. One blog I read said reservoirs can flood with little warning when dams release water. That's not a what if, it's a when. Every nail hammered into those houses is a step closer to disaster. Then there's the legal mess. This isn't just a misunderstanding, it's a violation of my property rights. I own this land, deed and all, and the HOA built on it without so much as a phone call. My lawyer was blunt. This is trespassing, maybe even fraud if they faked documents to get permits. The HOA could be liable for every house, every road, every blade of grass they touched. But it's not just about me. What about the people who buy these homes? They'll think they're getting a lakeside dream, not a legal nightmare. If the truth comes out after they move in, they could be stuck with homes they can't sell, built on stolen land. I saw a video where a Texas homeowner sued their HOA for building on a disputed lot. Legal battles like that can drag on for years, draining everyone involved. The financial hit is another gut punch. For me, it's the cost of fighting this, lawyers, surveys, maybe even tearing down what the HOA built. But the bigger picture is the homeowners who might buy these houses. Flood damage isn't cheap. One article I read said Harvey cost homeowners billions, with many uninsured because they didn't know they needed flood coverage. Homes in flood zones like mine lose value fast once the risk is known. Imagine buying a $300,000 house, only to learn it's in a reservoir and worth half that, or nothing if it floods. The HOA's mistake could bankrupt families who trusted them. And the HOA itself? They might face lawsuits from me, from buyers, even from the county if permits were mishandled. This isn't just a bad decision. It's a financial ticking time bomb. The emotional toll is harder to measure, but it's real. Every time I visit my property, I feel a knot in my chest. This was my grandfather's land, a place of peace, now turned into a construction site. I'm angry, but I'm also heartbroken. What if I'd planned to build a home here for my kids? That dream's on hold, maybe gone. And I can't stop thinking about the families who might move in, unaware of the risk. One video I watched showed a homeowner crying as she described her flooded house, not knowing it was in a flood zone. That could be the future for these buyers: stress, fear, and betrayal. Even the workers on site, when I talked to them, seemed uneasy once they heard the land wasn't the HOA's. This mistake is tearing at everyone's peace of mind. As I stood there, watching trucks haul in more materials, I couldn't shake the feeling of how wrong this all was. The houses kept going up, but the consequences were piling up faster. Floods, lawsuits, financial ruin, and broken trust. I knew I had to do something, but the weight of it all was overwhelming. What happens next is anyone's guess, but one thing's clear: this isn't over. The sight of those houses on my Texas lakeside property, my land, my sanctuary, still makes my blood boil. An HOA built a neighborhood here without my permission, oblivious to the fact that this is a flood control reservoir. The risks are huge: flooding, legal battles, financial ruin. But I wasn't about to stand by and let this slide. I had to act, and fast. What would you do if someone stole your land and turned it into a disaster waiting to happen? Stick with me as I dive into the steps I took to fight back, the options on the table, and the chaos this could unleash for everyone involved. This story's about to get even wilder. My first move was calling my lawyer friend again. She didn't sugarcoat it. This was a serious violation. You need to document everything, she said, and we need to move quickly. I spent hours gathering every piece of paper tied to the property: my deed, tax records, even old letters from my grandfather about the land. It was airtight. I own this place, no question. My lawyer suggested sending a cease and desist letter to the HOA, demanding they stop construction immediately. So we drafted one, laying out that they were trespassing on my property and building in a flood control reservoir. I sent it certified mail to make sure they couldn't dodge it. That felt like a punch thrown, but I knew it was just the start. Next, I contacted the county. I needed to know how the HOA got permits to build on my land. The clerk I spoke to was as shocked as I was. She pulled the records and found the HOA had filed permits claiming they owned the property. No one at the county double-checked the deed. Apparently, that's not always required in Texas's fast-moving system. The clerk said they'd flag the permits and launch an investigation, but that could take weeks. Meanwhile, construction was still going full speed. I drove back to the site, and those houses were getting roofs now. Every day I waited, the deeper this mess got. My lawyer laid out my options. Option 1. Sue the HOA for trespassing and damages. This could force them to tear down everything and pay for my losses, but lawsuits are slow and expensive. Option 2. Negotiate with the HOA for compensation, maybe let them buy the land legally. But that felt wrong. Why should I give up my grandfather's land because of their mistake? Option 3. Work with the county to revoke the permits, halting construction. That might stop the project cold, but it could drag on in court if the HOA fought back. Each choice was a gamble, and I was still weighing them, feeling the pressure of every passing day. Then there were the homeowners, people who might buy these houses, unaware they're in a flood zone. I felt a responsibility to warn them. I found a local real estate blog that mentioned lakeside estates and left a comment about the flood risk and ownership dispute. It got some attention, but I worried it wasn't enough. I thought about posting signs at the site, something like, "This is a flood control reservoir, buyer beware." My lawyer warned me to be careful. Publicly shaming the HOA could backfire if we ended up in court. Still, I couldn't let families move into homes that might flood or get tied up in a legal mess. One video I watched showed homeowners stuck in a similar situation, furious at their HOA for hiding flood risks. I didn't want that fate for anyone here. The HOA's response to my letter came a few days later. They didn't apologize. Instead, they claimed it was a clerical error and offered to discuss solutions. That vague reply made my skin crawl. Were they stalling, hoping to finish construction before I could stop them? I set up a meeting with their board, determined to get answers. Meanwhile, I kept researching. A news article about a Texas HOA caught my eye. They'd built in a floodplain and faced lawsuits after homes flooded. The parallels were uncanny. As I prepared to confront the HOA, I couldn't shake the feeling that this fight was about more than my land. It was about stopping a disaster before it ruined lives. The stakes were high, and I was ready to push forward. The fight over my Texas lakeside property is heating up. An HOA illegally built a neighborhood on my land, not knowing it's a flood control reservoir, and I'm in the thick of battling them to stop this disaster. The risks of flooding, lawsuits, and ruined dreams are real, but this mess also taught me lessons I never expected to learn. If you own property, want to buy a home, or just deal with an HOA, you need to hear this. Stick with me as I share what I've learned and how you can protect yourself from a nightmare like mine. This story's got twists you won't want to miss. First, let's talk about protecting yourself as a homeowner. I never thought my land could be taken over like this, but it happened because I didn't double-check its status. One big lesson: always research your property's flood risk. FEMA flood maps are a good start. They show if your land is in a flood zone or, like mine, a flood control reservoir. You can find these maps online or at your county office. I wish I'd looked sooner, but I trusted the land was safe because it was my grandfather's. Don't make that mistake. A video I watched showed a guy who checked FEMA maps before buying and dodged a floodplain disaster. It's simple research that can save you from losing everything in a flood. Another tip is to dig into your property's history. My deed was clear, but the HOA either missed it or ignored it. Before you buy or build, get a title search to confirm ownership and check for any liens or disputes. It's not just about your land, make sure no one else claims it. I read a blog about a Texas couple who lost their home because of a title mix-up with their HOA. A quick search could have saved them. I'm kicking myself for not being more proactive, but now I'm telling everyone, know your land inside and out before anyone swings a hammer. HOAs need to be held accountable too. This whole mess happened because the HOA didn't do their homework. They should have checked the deed and flood maps before breaking ground. In Texas, HOAs have a lot of power, but they're not above the law. If you're in an HOA community, ask questions. Demand to see permits, surveys, and flood disclosures. One article I found mentioned Texas Senate Bill 339, passed after Hurricane Harvey, which requires sellers to disclose if a property's in a flood zone. But not everyone follows it, and HOAs can slip through the cracks. Don't let them. Push for transparency, because their mistakes could cost you your home. For those thinking about buying in a place like Lakeside Estates, my advice is blunt. Don't trust glossy brochures. That shiny HOA sign on my property promised a dream community, but it's a flood risk waiting to happen. Before you sign anything, visit the site, talk to locals, and check county records. I saw a YouTube video where a realtor warned about too good to be true developments in Texas flood zones. He said buyers should always ask, why is this land so cheap? In my case, the HOA saw open land and thought it was a gold mine, not a reservoir. Don't fall for the same trap. This ordeal also taught me how important it is to speak up. I'm not just fighting for my land, I'm trying to protect future homeowners who don't know what they're walking into. Posting about the issue online, like on that real estate blog, was my way of sounding the alarm. You can do the same. If you spot something shady with an HOA or developer, share it. Comment on forums, warn neighbors, or even contact local news. One blog I read said community pressure forced an HOA to fix a floodplain issue before homes were sold. Your voice matters, and it could save someone from a bad deal. As I gear up for my next steps, whether it's suing the HOA or pushing the county to act, these lessons keep me grounded. I'm learning to navigate a system that's messy and unfair, but I'm not alone. If you're watching this, you're part of the fight to hold HOAs accountable and keep your property safe. This isn't just my story, it's a wake-up call for anyone with a stake in their land. The battle's far from over, and I'm ready to keep pushing. Here we are, at the end of this wild ride through my battle with an HOA that illegally built a neighborhood on my Texas lakeside property, a place I thought was my sanctuary, only to learn it's part of a flood control reservoir. From the shock of seeing houses where they don't belong to uncovering the flood risks, legal violations, and hard lessons, this story has been a roller coaster. But we're not done yet. There's more to unpack, and I need you to stick with me as I share what this all means and why it matters to you. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, owned land, or dreamed of a home, this is your wake-up call. Let's dive into the final piece of this saga. This whole mess started with a gut punch, finding construction on my land, my grandfather's legacy, without a single word from the HOA. Those half-built houses, the shiny Lakeside Estates sign, they weren't just an invasion, they were a disaster in the making. Learning my property was part of a flood control reservoir, like Addicts or Barker, made it clear, these homes could be underwater when the next big storm hits. The HOA's mistake isn't just about my rights, it's about families who might move in, unaware their dream home is a flood risk. I can't stop picturing kids playing in yards that could turn into lakes, or parents losing everything because no one told them the truth. It's a betrayal that cuts deep, and it's why I'm fighting. The stakes here are massive. We're talking about more than my land. It's about the people who might buy these homes, thinking they're safe. I watched a video where a Houston family lost their house to flooding in a reservoir during Hurricane Harvey. They had no idea their home was in a danger zone. That could happen here if I don't act. Then there's the legal side. My lawyer says the HOA's trespassing, maybe even committing fraud by claiming my land. Suing them could force those houses down, but it's a long road. Negotiating might get me compensation, but at what cost to my family's legacy? Every option feels heavy, and the HOA's vague, "let's discuss solutions," response only fuels my distrust. They're stalling, and those houses keep going up. What gets me is how this could have been avoided. A simple deed check would have shown I own the land. A glance at FEMA flood maps would have flagged the reservoir risk. Texas's loose zoning laws let developers and HOAs move fast, but that's no excuse for skipping homework. I read a blog about a similar case where an HOA built in a floodplain, and homeowners paid the price when floods hit. Texas laws, like Senate Bill 339, demand flood disclosures, but clearly, some HOAs dodge that. It's not just negligence, it's greed, putting profits over people. That's why I'm pushing the county to investigate and warning potential buyers online. No one should face what I'm facing, or worse, what those future homeowners might endure. This fight has taught me to never take my property for granted. If you're watching, you need to hear this. Check your land's flood risk, dig into its history, and hold your HOA accountable. Don't trust a pretty sales pitch or a fancy sign. I learned that the hard way, And now I'm telling everyone, research before you buy, build, or trust. Share this story, because it's not just mine. It's a warning for anyone who owns a piece of this earth or dreams of it. Comment below if you've dealt with an HOA nightmare or a flood zone surprise. I want to hear your story. And hit that subscribe button, because I'm not done fighting, and I'll keep you posted on what happens next. As I stand on my property, staring at those houses that don't belong, I feel the weight of this battle. It's not just about getting my land back. It's about stopping a disaster, protecting families, and holding the HOA accountable. The road ahead is tough, with lawyers, meetings, maybe even court. But I'm in this, and I'm not backing down. This story's still unfolding, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Keep watching, because this fight is for all of us who believe our land, our homes, our dreams, are worth protecting.